fact that we could reverse, like, the opposite could be true.
Right, and why, like there's no piss on a stick test that tells you that this is a load intolerant joint action. You know what I mean? It's like it's like, what's the objective data for that? You know what I mean? Like, if it's not a tangible thing, they act like it's all mythology. I'm like, oh, okay. Can you put your freaking thoughts into a jar? You can't. It's a real thing. So just because something's not concrete, like abstract things aren't real. Like, yes, abstract things are real as well. So I think people get hung up on, if you can't touch it, smell it, taste it, oh, that's just faith. I'm like, well, possibly, but there's also, there's things you can do to change these outcomes that are, conceptual in nature, and you can change these outcomes. But yeah, so
now I know strength coaches are a little bit more familiar with, don't shoot me for this, but for saying RPR. So they might be thinking, like, what's the difference?
Yeah, that's a good
to
one.
People that are curious.
Yeah, and to me, it's funny. I literally, you say don't shoot me. I'm literally not threatened by any other thing in the industry, because my thing, it's all an exploration. The waters are deep. None of us have all the answers. So a lot of our students are RPR guys, be activated people. It's great. The big difference, in a nutshell, I look at RPR and a lot of different systems, their modalities, and at a certain point, you're going to come to a dead end, because it's like if you see such and such, you do this thing. If you see this, you do that. Square one is more of, hey, here are the rules. I didn't make the rules. These are the rules. And now we get to play within the confines of right versus left, up versus down, gravity pulling you down. So it's literally more of a principle-based piece. So it's very much, I always say what square one is, I look at it as a toolbox, and you put the RPRs and the MATs and the manipulations and the stretches and whatever you want to do, it'll hold all those tools beautifully. So I look at it as very much a complement. But with square one, there is no end game. Like you can just keep testing things and keep going, and there is no end game. You're not going to come to a dead end with it.
What about the notion that maybe this could be saved as your this, as in Signal 6 and Square One, could be your ace in your hand, and save it for when an athlete is in year 4 or 5 with you, rather than, like, at first you could just do some of the stretches that you talked about?
My thought is, if you have a tool that can help people and you withhold it, like, screw you, man. Like, I'm like, that'd be such a bogus thing to do to an athlete. So my thought is, if you have this tool that's so amazing, I wouldn't know why you would wait to use it on them.
Would there be diminishing returns then? Because if you think about, from a training age standpoint in the weight room, if I give athletes accommodating resistance, it could help them. But if it's not exactly what they need at that time, then they're robbed of the adaptation later in life. Over the course of 4 to 5 years, then, does Signal 6 wear off, quote unquote, and no longer be effective?
Well, I think Signal 6 will have its limitations, in that if you're working with an athlete and his present load intolerant joint action isn't in his neck to his hips, like say it's his knee, his ankle, his toes, his hands, his elbows, somewhere outside, you're going to come to a dead end with Signal 6, because it's just not as granular. You don't get as much detail with it as you would with regular square one. But my thought is, if you're having somebody you have them for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, I'd rather set the trajectory higher. So I think the first time I have somebody, whether it's private practice, someone comes in with back pain, or I have a high level athlete, I want to get square one. I want to get that on them right away, raise their game, and you're just changing the trajectory instead of like waiting to get there. So I don't look at square one as a boost, even though it gets you a boost. I think it gives the athlete better raw materials on day one. So, like, why would you want to wait to do that? Yeah. So maybe I'm misunderstanding your question, though, too.
No. I mean, because that's where it's like I said, I could do super maximal eccentrics with athletes, when they come in, because it's going to get them stronger.
Yep.
But from a nervous system standpoint, they're not going to understand how to actually move efficiently or lift a heavy enough of a load, because they're not, actually ready to handle that. Same thing could then be said about, like I said, the accommodating resistance. Like, their body, they need to learn how to neurologically perform a squat properly, or lunge, or bench before I start loading them with ridiculous ranges of motion. And so that's where it's like, okay, if there is this system of Square One, Signal 6, either one, that does help you, but if there's other underlying things, like if you just have shit ankle mobility, What if I just attack with some soft tissue work prior? Okay, that stops working. Okay, now let me start layering on the things that can work to continue to see the success. So like I see that side of it, but then I also
Yeah.
see where you're like, okay, if I can take you from here to here and then make sure you never go below here on this trajectory, like so I
All
kind
right.
of can see both sides of it. Taking a quick break from the show, everybody. Promise this will take less than 15 seconds. Friendly reminder, go ahead, hit that subscribe button below. It helps us out and it helps you out by being notified whenever we have new content come out. So hit that subscribe button. And with this, let's get back to the show.
Yeah. And I see what you're saying too, if you have this mobility issue, but I've seen so many times where people think it's a mobility issue. You get the nervous system organized and that mobility issue goes away. Like people's squat performance changes instantly. That's a very frequent thing. So my whole deal is, I think at square one, at its core, we're reducing the body's need to compensate. And the sooner we can get it to compensate less, the better. Like I don't see the value in probably 99.9% people allowing them to compensate. So if you could do something about that, like that to me that's day one stuff in my mind. So yeah. And
No, man,
maybe,
yeah, no,
yeah.
I've just been, like I said, thinking about it and just thinking back more about, the best, like, especially, like you said too, though, if you can just kind of, the sooner you can ingrain it in a team setting culture of like, this is just what we
Yeah.
do and this is part
Yeah.
of what we do. I think that's the best way to go about it because when you try to pick and choose when you use it, I
Yeah.
don't think it works as well. Like me,
Yeah.
as I'm hearing you talk, like I'm just kind of reflecting back on when I had been using it with the football team here at Towson, and it just, I think you were right. Like it could have been better used. Hey, this is what we do, and this is just kind of
Yeah.
part of our warm up. Actually, like this is the first thing we
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. I think that's for people. I mean, again, when we have students, like they're learning a perspective that took me 15 years to get to. So
Yeah.
my thought, that's why I say like the easiest way to integrate square one is like, hey, if you just squeeze it into a little bit as your warm up and you just use it 3 or 4 little layers every session, like that's phenomenal. If that's all they ever do with it, that's a pretty good way to use it. Because again, there's limitations with any system. Square one has its limitations, but another limitation with Signal Six is you don't really. There's no assessment with it. It's just kind of hey, here's some exercises. It's a reset, but maybe it's not. You know what I mean? It might not be if you did this on 10 guys, maybe it resets 7 of the guys or 8 of the guys. But 2 of those guys, they're an issue in their wrist and that guy's an ankle. 6-6 isn't necessarily going to touch the neurological piece at the ankle. It might change their ankle mobility, but it's not really addressing the neurological issue of that athlete in that moment in time. But again, for 100 freaking bucks, if you run this on 100 athletes and 70 of them now jump higher, that's a pretty good value.
It's
You
good
know,
ROI.
yeah, so it's not perfect, and neither is square one, but square one's closer to perfect, we'll say.
I'm gonna let us wrap up here to respect your
Yeah, yeah.
time. What would be the one thing that you would leave our members and
Mm,
listeners with of like the kind of big overarching principle of your philosophy of training and
yeah,
Sig Six Square One?
yeah. I think it's that binary response of the nervous system. There's only 2 responses the nervous system has to any input. It's either safe or threat. So whatever you can do to get the nervous system to perceive that whatever the athlete is trying to do as safe, you're doing a massive service for them as an athlete as far as performance and for resiliency, injury prevention, that sort of thing. So really, it's like learning how to differentiate between safe and threatening response to the nervous system, and that's I'm not trying to sell square one, but that's what it's built around. I just think that's so huge. It's almost like giving the brain access of safety to all kinds of different patterns is massively important.
Congratulations on making it to the end of the video. Why don't you celebrate by watching more videos just like it? You can also help us on our quest to placate the algorithm gods by liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting. Thank you.